This is John Colo with GrowingYourGreens.com. Today we have another exciting episode for you, and we're coming at you from the 2014 San Francisco Flower and Garden Show. This is one amazing show, probably one of the best flower and garden shows that I've been to, not only for the nice demonstration and display gardens, not only for the exhibitors, but for the people and the talent and some of the people that are here. I mean, I'm just meeting so many cool people that have so much information, and it's just so good to learn from these people that I'm learning from, and then I could share them with you. So what we're going to do in this episode is actually we're going to go inside and learn about worm castings and why not all worm castings are created equal and why some are definitely better than others. Now we're at the booth of the Worm Gold Plus, and this is total organic plant care. I talk about organic gardening, and the worm castings is a primary source of my nutrition in my garden, besides the compost, of course, and besides the other trace minerals that I put in. And the reason specifically for the worm castings is not because of the nutrition in there, and there is nutrition in there, but it's for the biology in there, right? The beneficial microbes that are in there that are literally gonna help break down the nutrients in your soil to get them into the plants. And like I talked about a little bit earlier, not all worm castings are created equal, and the Worm Gold Plus is my favorite worm casting at this time for a few specific reasons. Number one, besides just having the worm castings, they also add the kelp and the trace minerals or the rock dust in there to provide you guys a complete solution. I've never seen another worm casting that actually does this, and this lets me know that the master formulator here knows what he's doing because he wants to get some of those into the product because he knows it's going to increase your plant growth. And let me go ahead and show you guys an example. Here's an example of using coconut coir with manure-based castings, right, on this side, and it shows a picture of the plant, how big it grew, which is still pretty small, and you can't really even see any roots in here. Then on this side, we got basically landscape waste casting, so earthworm casting made out of landscape waste. Once again, the plant's pretty small there, and then there's no root hairs growing. And then if you use the same coconut coir with the Worm Gold Plus, I mean, you can see the roots in the picture there, and the plant growth is much more markedly improved. I mean, it's much larger. I mean, just like if you go buy a hamburger at In-N-Out Burger, it's not the same hamburger at Wendy's or McDonald's, right? They're all different, right? The quality, vastly different at different fast food joints, but also in things like worm castings, not all are created equal. I actually have a really good story about this, and I'll put a link below. Like back, I don't know, several years ago, and you guys, old-time viewers would know this, I actually had a problem with aphids in my garden, and I got online, did some research, and found out that, if I put worm castings in my plants, it'll make them immune to aphids, or that's what they said online anyways. So I got some EB Stone worm castings, dump bags. I mean, I covered like the top layer, like an inch, man, of worm castings in my bed. I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna get rid of the aphids, because that's what it said online. And I did that, and guess what? Nothing happened, and I wasted all this money on these worm castings. It didn't work, and I'm like, man, worm castings are a joke. They just don't work. And I'm like, are these people lying to me? Well, since that time, I've done a lot of research and learned a thing or two, and I come to find out that all worm castings are not created equal. And if you want to get the results, you got to use the right kind of worm castings. So here's yet another example here by basically a seed company that's growing basically a nursery plants. And I know you guys might not be able to see that, but basically using their standard chemical solution or using the worm castings to grow their little plants there, a 40% increase in growth of the top growth and 100% explosion of growth in the root growth better. So growing organically can actually be better than chemicals and is better than chemicals if you do it properly, but not, once again, not all worm castings is created equal, and just because you're growing organic doesn't mean you're gonna get this explosive root growth. So what we're gonna do next, actually we're gonna interview the engineer, and he's a mechanical engineer by trade, so this is why he's really gone in deeper than anybody I know to learn the specifics of how and why worm castings work, and I know you engineers can appreciate out there that are watching this. And he's really gone to maximize, and over all the years he's been doing this, increase the performance of his worm castings, which leaves literally the competitors in the dust. So next we're gonna go ahead and sit down and talk with George Hahn about the Worm Gold and how to maximize production in your garden. Now we're with George Hahn, the genius behind the Worm Gold product, the mechanical engineer who basically took worm castings to the next level. And we're just gonna ask him a few questions today he's been doing the worm castings for the last 15 years, you know, as a mechanical engineer, like literally increasing and bettering, you know, what he's getting out of the worm castings. You know, not all worm castings are created equal. One of the principles that I live my life by is CANI, C-A-N-I. It stands for constant and never-ending improvement. No matter what I do today, I'm always trying to make it a little bit better tomorrow, and that's exactly what George has done with the worm castings. So I can appreciate this a lot, because most companies just literally feed their worms, take out the castings, and sell it. And you know, you're not gonna get the same results as I've discovered the hard way. So we're gonna ask him a few poignant questions about what makes the worm gold different. So George, why is worm gold different than any other worm casting on the market?
If worm castings are produced by feeding manure, you only get a few of the recycling engines. Those recycling engines are called chitin degraders and cellulose degraders. If you feed manure, you get 2 to 3 million chitin degraders, 4 to 5 million cellulose degraders. The same level of those is produced when you're feeding landscape trimmings. But what we found is by changing that feed mix, we could increase the level of those recycling engines. The chitin degraders now, we have a tested level of 220 million organisms per gram, 450 million cellulose organisms per gram. These are the engines that feed the plant. So instead of having a moped engine in your Mack truck, we've increased this so you got 1,000 engines working together to give your plant production.
Wow. So I know some of you guys, that might have went over your head, like, you know, when I first heard about this stuff, it went over my head too, and might not be understanding this completely. Let me go ahead and fill in a little bit about what these recycling engine things are. You know, I model in my garden the food soil web, right? Like, people like to say, like, people are at the top of the food chain because we eat all the little smaller things, right? And it's just like that in your soil. There's a lot of different soil microbiology, including the bacteria, the fungi, and all these different microorganisms that basically help bring nutrients into the plant. It's these recycling engines that's in the Worm Gold Plus worm castings that, as George said, are lower in other castings that are really the drivers behind driving the nutrition in the plants to give it the optimal results in your garden. So George, let's talk about plant health. You know, you guys know, as we know, you know, if you eat a healthy diet, you're gonna be healthy. If you're eating a fast food, McDonald's food, you're gonna probably have a weaker immune system. You're gonna get sick more often. But if you're eating lots of fruits and vegetables out of your garden and you know, juicing them and all this kind of stuff, eating a healthy diet, you're probably gonna rarely get sick. I have friends that actually rarely, if ever, get sick. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have friends that might be sick all the time, right? Our health is only based on what we're eating. You know, you are what you eat is a common saying, and just like that, our plants are what they eat. So George, tell us about plant health and the Worm Gold Plus worm castings and how plant health can only be increased by using your specially designed castings.
All plants need a full, balanced nutrition. That nutrition is provided by the recycling engines digesting the bacterial and fungal organisms. The plants will actually signal the recyclers and say, oh, I need a little iron. So the recyclers will find the biological organisms that contain the iron, so it will digest that to feed it. The roots of the plants will not pass bacterial fungal, so the nutrition to get to the plant has to be supplied through the recycling engines. So the plant says, I need this nutrition. Those recyclers hunt out the bacterial and fungal organisms then to feed the plant, and they will digest anything that's there so they can feed the plant. If you do not have the recyclers and you do not have the compost source to provide it, if you don't have the rock mineral to allow that to uptake, and then that plant cannot get full nutrition. The plant will be the healthiest when it can get full nutrition to grow at its genetic maximum.
Wow. So I know you guys still might be like, John, why didn't I ever hear this before? Like, nobody else talked about these recycler engines, you know? I mean, I actually really didn't hear about it until earlier yesterday when I was talking to George, and he explained it to me, and I understood it completely. So George, why haven't we heard about this before as gardeners, as in, you know, people that have gone to, you know, college for, you know, soil science and all this kind of stuff in agriculture? How come this is not talked about?
Many people have talked about providing the NPK value to plants, and those are only 3 of the top nutrition items that are needed. But For a plant to be fully healthy, you have to feed all the nutrition. The natural feeding system. Go to the redwood forest. There's no bags of fertilizer behind that. What's there is a natural feeding system, and that is compost, which provides the carbon and nitrogen to feed the biology that's supplied by the earthworms. That's bacteria and fungi. Those bacteria, when one bacteria divides into two, it needs 7 carbons and 1 nitrogen. When one fungus grows from 1 to 2, it needs 30 carbons and 1 nitrogen. But the root zone of the plants will not allow bacteria or fungal organisms to pass. So how do you feed those plants? The recyclers have to digest that fungus and that bacteria. The recyclers are 2 types, actually 3. You have the beneficial nematodes, and they can eat anything, bacterial and fungal. But the fungal organisms are either cellulose-based, and that's called a faux fungus, and those are only 2 families. Those are Pythium and Phytophthora. All the other fungus is chitin-based. So you need both the cellulose recycling organisms and the chitin recycling organisms. So when the chitin recyclers digest the chitin-based fungus, it will excrete the enzyme chitinase. It will dissolve that chitin structure of that fungus. Then the recycler will Pac-Man eat it and then feed that nutrition to the plant. When the cellulose degraders digest any of the cellulose-based fungus, and that's only the Pythium and the Phytophthora families, it will excrete the enzyme cellulase, and then those cellulose degrading, cellulose recycling organisms will digest that cellulose-based fungus, and then that nutrition is fed to the plant. That nutrition can pass the root zone. So when you have that full soil food web, which is compost, the full biology, and the recyclers, now you can feed the plant all the nutrition it needs to be fully healthy.
Wow, George. So let's talk about yields and when you have plants that are fully healthy. Like, what kind of yield improvements have you seen working with some of the different, farms and research, colleges that you've worked with?
Nutrition, proper nutrition for a plant will allow the plants to grow at their genetic maximum. We did a research study with the USDA published by Dr. Joe Bradford on pecans. The pecan yield, typically the chemical-fed pecan, will have 1 nut at every bud break. We were able to see the first year out, doubles and some triples. By the 4th year, all bud break on every pecan tree was 4 nuts at every bud break. That yield had increased 400%. Worked with Japanese agriculture on the brassicas, the lettuce, and the cabbage. The Chinese cabbage increased first year out 370%. That's counting the increase in the root mass as well as the increase in the crop that you can harvest. Other lettuce crops, over 400% increase. Now, we don't want to say, oh, you're going to see that amount, but in that controlled environment, we saw that. Onions, 8 different fields were tested. In Japan, we saw a 400% increase in the size of the onions. Rice, we increased the root mass of the rice from the size of your fist to a 20-inch diameter root mass. The increase in the harvested fruit, the harvested rice, went up 220%. That's the average increase on 13 different farms, and that was researched by Japanese agriculture. And in Japan, they test the rice and sell the rice based upon the nutrition level. The highest rating rice is number 1, and the lowest is number 8. The Japanese only eat number 1 and number 2 rated rice. So on these 13 fields where the yield was increased 220%, all the rice tested at a number 1 rating.
Wow. And this is why I do these videos with you guys, to share information that you may not have ever heard before. I mean, this is just duplicating nature to the maximum. I mean, George has engineered a natural worm casting that's going to really ramp up your production and do it naturally, make your plants healthier. You're going to yield more and get more nutrition, and that's actually why I'm growing my own food. One of the primary reasons, I have the most nutrition and grow the most amount of food in a small residential house, which is the situation that I'm in, that many of you guys are in as well. So George, I know that you're based in California and you have a distribution fairly well covered in the West Coast, but I know some of the people out there in YouTube land may not be able to get your specific worm castings because, once again, not all worm castings are created equal. Although at the end of this episode, I'll have a way that you guys could get it shipped anywhere in the 50 United States. But for those of you guys that may not want to buy George's worm castings, which is, you know, if somebody already does something, I just say just buy it, get it done right the first time. And I'm sure George is not going to share all his trade secrets with you. But George, what's a way that somebody can increase, you know, some of the nutrition in the worm castings that they're making at home?
If you're producing worm castings at home, don't just feed food waste. Feed anything that those plants can eat. Cut up cardboard, add that. If you trim your hair, add that. You trim your toenails, add that. If you have a nice meal at a seafood restaurant and they have save the shrimp shells and add the shrimp shells to your worm bed. Make sure you have a good source of cellulose, and that can come from the cardboard, and a good source of chitin, which can come from the hair, the fingernails, the shrimp shells. Now you can produce the highest quality worm castings possible, and you increase those recycling engines, your plants are going to grow better.
Wow. I mean, so that's how you guys can do it at home, of course. I'm going to just be using and have been using actually the Worm Gold Plus in my garden to get some amazing growing results. And I mean, that's how I do it. I learn from all these experts. I go around, share this with you guys so that you guys could do it too. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with George, learning about the Worm Gold Plus. Now, if you do want to get a special deal on the Worm Gold Plus delivered, probably like around $1 a pound delivered price, you don't even got to get in your car, drive anywhere to pick it up. You're going to want to check that link below. It's boogiebrew.net/GYG. You're going to check out the worm box and get a bunch of the Worm Gold delivered for the best price that I've negotiated with Josh at the Boogie Brew Company. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, learn a few things at the same time, and now you know how you can increase the yields and nutrition of the crops you're growing at home with the best quality, highest quality worm castings that I've ever found. Once again, my name is John Kohler with GrowingYourGreens.com. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep on growing.